As I go about my day, I'll continually ask myself, would Jesus prioritize this? If not, I'll recalibrate. Surrender requires humility, and humility brings wisdom. Wisdom invites obedience, and obedience produces peace. A life of peace is found through my surrender. Proverbs 11:2 says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom.
Hmm.
So I couldn't find a source for that quote, but I loved it. I love how it starts off. As I go about my day, I'll ask, will Jesus prioritize this? You know how sometimes when you're trying to figure out how to spend your time, everything's good, it seems like, but what's the best option can be hard to figure out. So
Hmm.
I think that's what attracted me to this quote. Has nothing
Well,
to do with our topic today.
what was the line that said something about peace is found in surrender? That
Mm,
usually goes against the grain.
yes.
Surrendering doesn't, you don't think is going to bring you peace, but it
A
does,
life of
depending.
peace is found through my surrender. Yeah.
Good one.
Welcome to Looking Up, friends, on this beautiful fall day. I'm Kathy Pollard, one of your hosts. Carla Moore is with me. She's your other host, and we're looking forward to talking with each other, hanging out with you guys today. So, we're going to talk about something that I find very interesting. But before we get to that, Carla, how are you? What's new? Tell me all the things.
I am wearing long sleeves.
You look very
Well, I do have
fallish
them rolled up, but long sleeves
in
because
Texas.
it's 62 degrees outside. Yeah.
Nice.
And on Sunday, it was 101. So
Oh,
we are
oh,
super,
wow.
super relieved.
Yeah.
It's October, the whatever, middle of October, and we're
Mhm.
still breaking records on heat. So I was just
Yeah,
thinking and laughing because I'm so fickle because I don't like being cold. And here we head
that's
into
right.
winter and I'm going to be cold, but it's just that breath of fresh air. And
Hmm.
what is it about? It just looks different outside when the temperature
Hmm.
goes down. I don't understand what that is. There must be some scientific reason, but anyway, we're excited about a little cool weather. It'll be back in the mid
Yeah.
80s by Friday, probably, but we're
We
going to
had
enjoy
our
it.
first frost last night.
Hmm.
So woke up and the house was cold and the ground was white with frost. And I had to bring in I have a bunch of herbs still growing like crazy outside. So I brought in a bunch of it just so I could kind of take care of it and put it in the dehydrator before I start losing it to frost. So
So what do you do with it after you put it in the dehydrator?
put it in jars and use it for cooking.
Oh, so it's like the kind of spices you buy at the store.
Yeah,
Those are
so I brought
dehydrated, dried.
in I brought in parsley and rosemary last night, tons of parsley. It took me literally an hour to because I don't put the stems in the dehydrator, just
Hmm.
the leaves. I do Italian flat leaf parsley.
Hmm.
And so and then when they're dry, I don't crumble them up or anything. I just put them in the jar like that. And then when I use them, I can crumble them up and that'll release the flavor into whatever I'm cooking. But
I never
it
think
it
of
was
parsley as being flavorful.
in the store it's not.
Okay.
The dehydrated stuff you get in the store is not very flavorful. But it was pretty tedious work, I can tell you. I was up last night working on it, and Neil's out of town. So thankfully, he called me and kept me company for some of it.
Hmm. Did I also see cilantro or was that all parsley?
It's
I thought it,
all parsley. Yeah,
okay.
cilantro doesn't last very long because it didn't like heat.
Hmm.
So I think next year I'm gonna try planting it in an area that gets more shade, like part
Hmm.
sun, part shade, to see if it'll last a little bit longer because we do
Put a
love
fan on it.
cilantro. Yeah. But the electricity went off at some point in the night. It just flickered because my fan and everything came back on. But so when I got up this morning, the dehydrator had shut off.
Uh-oh.
So I had to restart it, and now it'll be going all day. But this brand's pretty quiet. It's okay. But
Okay.
anyways, so
Well, I'll need to
what's
see
new with you?
pictures. Well, what's new? We sowed, actually, speaking of plants, my brother had given me a bag full of bluebonnet seeds back in the spring. And that's
Oh,
our state flower is
yeah.
bluebonnet. And
Yeah.
so John took them and I had written on the bag because I knew I would forget. Doug told me to sow them in October and he gave them to me like in April. So I'm thinking I've got to hang on to this for how many months and remember where it is. But I had them in a Ziploc bag and I'd written on there, sow in October. And then he said rocky soil or something else. So John took them out and
Where
put
are
them
they at?
in. Well, when you go out our back door and turn to the right, there's a big area that used to be a garden. We had a big garden.
Yeah.
But now the cows just go in there and keep the grass down. It's just wild, not even flowers, just grass,
Hmm.
weeds. It's just
Hmm.
weeds, but he sowed it in there. So hopefully we'll have some bluebonnets in the spring. I did not touch them, so they're safe from my black fingers, hopefully.
That'll be so pretty. You'll have
Yeah.
your own photo backdrop in your yard.
Yeah, I hope, and hopefully
Nice.
the weeds won't eat into that. But anyway,
Hmm.
that's one thing that's going on. I've been just
Hmm.
cleaning out. I know probably people are tired of hearing me talk about cleaning out, but really, I've combined three homes into ours because I took things from mom's house and brought things home from Denver. And then,
Yeah.
so I've got,
Big projects.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I feel like I'm whittling down a little more each day, but I've just
Hmm.
been, a couple days ago, I cleaned out our linen closet in our bathroom. And I just got rid of a bunch of stuff and it feels really good. So
Mm.
here's your early something good for you is do some organizing, clean out a closet. I cleaned out our pantry. There were some things
Wow.
in there that had expired. And I know some things are, they say best buy, but if it's like 2017, it's probably time to move it on out, depending on what it is. I know some
Hmm.
things can last, but got
Hmm.
rid of a bunch of stuff. And John pulled out the trash bag and he's like, "What do you got in here?" Cleaned
Oh,
out the
you got to do it
pantry.
when they're not around, when they can't go through and see.
Well, he didn't go through it. Sometimes he will like peer in there and I'll say, "Don't pull anything out. That's gross." But he took the
Hmm.
bag to the big trash can.
I
So,
did that yesterday. Because Neil's out of town, I
mm-hmm,
went through my desk area in the upstairs library.
mm-hmm.
And apparently it was a lot worse than I thought it did because 2.5 hours later, finally done. But I had some things kind of stacked. I always get these piles if I'm in the
Hmm.
middle of a project or I'll put
Yeah.
this up later or I'll find a place for this later and it lands on
Hmm.
my desk
I'm
upstairs.
surrounded by piles right now.
Yes. So I went through all of that, but then I decided to go through all my desk drawers and even my files. So I have my bottom drawer is a big filing cabinet
Hmm.
and where I put like household papers or topics for different lessons, all that stuff is in there.
Yeah.
Files on the animals are in there. I have one file in there that I just called sentimental. And as things show up throughout the year that I think I'm going to keep, a note or a card or a napkin from a wedding or something like that, I tuck it in
Hmm.
there and it starts getting really, really fat. And
Hmm.
so every 2 or 3 years, I pull that out and I go through it and I see what do I really want to keep. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I pull something out and I was like,
Why
why
did I
did I
keep
think
that?
I wanted to keep this?
Hmm.
So I just started, as I'm going through everything in my desk, I just started tossing everything in the middle of the library floor that I didn't want to keep. And that pile was huge. And
Yeah.
by the time I was done, I'm looking at it going, where was all that stuff?
Hmm.
And some of the stuff I'd had from when the boys were still at home and I was homeschooling them, I had
Yeah.
some school type things. And I'm like, why do I still have this pack of Spanish flashcards?
And you carried that from Colorado to Bowling Green.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
somehow. So
Oh,
it
it
felt
just feels so
so
good.
good. Yeah, it felt so good.
Yeah, I love doing stuff like that. And I tend to not be super sentimental. I do
Hmm.
keep little things, but anytime I think about keeping something, I think, am I really going to be sentimental about this? Or,
Yeah.
and I try to get rid of stuff. We had a couple of suitcases that they weren't damaged or anything, but they didn't roll the way I like. We're picky about
Yeah.
suitcases and bags and things like that. So I
Hmm.
filled those up with clothes and I filled them up with things from the linen closet and I don't know if you remember those great big bags that I think it was one of my something good for you several months ago that we were moving back and forth stuff from
Hmm.
Denver. I
Hmm.
filled one of those up with things and we took them to Goodwill. So,
It feels so good to purge.
oh, it does. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah. Hmm. Have you
We
been
were,
thrifting lately?
oh, I have, and I haven't found, well, yeah, here I am trying to take stuff, not bring things in, but I did find something really cool. I found, if you're watching, you can see they're quilt squares.
Hmm.
But they're not squares, they're hexagons. And you
Oh,
put them
those are
together.
so pretty.
Yeah, you put them together. They're hand stitched. I can
Wow.
tell by looking at the back. There's 25 of them.
Wow.
And somebody, I guess, I mean, they're old fabric. I ironed them all because they were all kind of wilty and crammed into a bag.
Hmm.
And you can
Hold up the
tell
stack.
it's, huh?
Hold up the
What?
stack.
Oh, the stack.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What a
You
great
can tell
find.
that they are like there's a couple of little squares or little hexagons that have a mark on them. So you can tell that whoever made them was using every bit of her material. And, she wasn't
Hmm.
cutting out the little marks and stuff. But I thought it would be fun. See what you think about this. If there's 25 of them, and I
Hmm.
thought I'm going to keep two of them and maybe make something. I don't know what yet, but make something out of them. I might put them on a side of a bag or I might frame them. I don't know. I might make a little pillow or something.
Throw a
But
pillow. Yeah.
yeah, throw a pillow. But I thought it would be fun in the group. I think what I'll do is post not individual pictures. I'll kind of spread them out and post a picture of it next week on the day that the podcast comes out. And the first 23 people that comment and send me, they can message me their address. I'm going to send you one of these squares
How
and you
fun is
make something
that?
out of it. And then we want to share what everybody decides to do with it.
How
And I
cute.
just thought it would be fun rather because I don't know that I would ever do anything with it. I couldn't leave them there.
No, of
Somebody's
course not.
hard fought battle with fabric. They made these cute little, I don't, they're not flour sack, it's fabric, but they're old. But I thought, what could, as a group, a bunch of us
Hmm.
could make and do
How
something. And
fun.
so,
I
anyway,
love
we'll
that
do
idea.
that.
If I were a crafty person, I'd be all over it. But I look
Oh,
forward to
yeah.
seeing what all the other crafty people do.
Yeah. So I don't know. There may
That'll
be
be
some
fun.
conditions like, you have a month to do this, or I don't know how I'll kind of
Hmm.
think through it before Monday comes up.
Yeah.
But there's some really cute ones in here. Some that are not as
Cute.
cute as others, sorry.
You're so
But
fun. You always think of fun
anyway,
ideas,
yeah,
fun
I thought
things to
that would be
do.
fun.
It is.
Yeah.
Good, good. I have some news.
Okay.
We have our book in hand.
It's an actual book.
Yes,
It's it's
it
fabulous and
it
it looks
is. It
professional
is.
and it's such good
Yes.
artwork. And I know
It
that's
is very good
exciting.
artwork. We are so
That didn't
excited.
seem to take
So
very long.
it really didn't. We were kind of impatient initially in the process, but
Hmm.
turnaround start to finish was not long at all. And we've already got a big box of ready to go out. We
Oh, nice.
our logo is green, black, and white, and so we
Hmm.
got these green packages that match the green on the logo, and we have business cards and
Wow.
stuff like that. So those are going to get shipped out this week,
You're a real
and
business.
I know, I'm so excited,
So where do we
so
order?
excited. Well, we're in the middle of working on, Emily is creating our website for us, and I'm working on a Facebook page also. So people can obviously just reach out to us personally
Hmm.
and we can send them one. And, but pretty soon, Emily's really close to being done. Pretty soon we'll be able to just share a link where people can just
Hmm.
order from the website. But
Yeah,
we're,
and order and pay on the same place.
yes,
Well,
yes.
that's fabulous. I'm so glad for Neil.
Yeah.
I know that's been a project in the making for a while, but
Mm-hmm.
how exciting. Not just a book of his that's published, but you're publishing it yourself and
Yeah.
you have a new
Yeah.
business. Very cool.
We're very excited. We're grateful. It's been a lot of work, a lot of hands helping.
Yeah.
So,
Well, a lot of family. I think that's really neat too,
yes.
since you're
Well, in
involving the boys.
fact, Dale is the one that designed the logo for us. I'll put it up there. I don't know if you can see it real well, but can you see
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
Looks like you.
And we kind of wanted it to incorporate a Motley Meadows kind of feel
Hmm.
too. And I think he hit it spot on, but he called it Life in Favor Family Publishing Company
Hmm.
on the card, which I
Yeah.
love. So,
Hmm. So Dale
uh,
did the cards and the book as well, right?
and Janelle helped. There were some of the things that they were looking at with this logo that she tweaked, and so they kind of worked on it together. But anyway, that's big news for us, and we're
Congratulations.
excited. Thank
That
you. Thank
that is
you.
big news.
Yeah. And I have a
Not.
couple of small things to share, but you
Mhm.
go now.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Um, so I mentioned recently that Stacey Warren, does puzzles also, and she gave me like a little puzzle scoop magnifying glass thing.
Hmm.
Well, Sunday she brought me a puzzle so that it's a fall picture so that I could do it, but she said there's a little card on the inside that you have to sign. And I just found it to be the cutest thing because this card in there, it says puzzle user or something like that and the date. And so there's names on it. of people that have put this puzzle together when they did it. And some people included how long it took them to do the puzzle.
How fun.
Yeah, so I thought this is adorable. It's like a puzzle library
Yeah.
that she's doing. Um, so that was cute. And then the other thing that I wanted to share made me think of you because Roger and Joyce Johnson had us over to play cards the other night, and she made Hoppin' John and pimento cheese sandwiches with homemade pimento cheese.
Okay.
So I
What'd you
thought about
think?
you. It was good. It was good. But I thought about you because you would have been all over that.
Mm-hmm. Hoppin' John is black-eyed peas, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And
Like a
she,
dip or something, or
no, it was a soup.
oh,
It's like a
oh,
soup. So
okay.
it's like black eyed peas and rice and I don't know what else she had in there, sausage and rotel. I don't know what all is in there, but she makes this homemade, I forget what she calls it, but it's almost like a ketchup relish kind of a thing that she cans, and they put a spoonful of that on there, and it was
Mm-hmm.
really good. But I thought about
Okay,
you
and
because of
what
the.
was the pimento cheese again? It was called what?
It was just she made pimento cheese for us to put on sandwiches, but it was homemade pimento cheese.
I
She
thought you
made
called
it.
it honey something or other.
No, I just said homemade,
Oh, homemade. Okay.
homemade pimento cheese. Yeah. So anyway, I
Did
thought
she
about
leave the
you because we
pimentos
had
out?
just talked about that. No, no,
Does Joyce listen to the podcast and find
I
out
don't
that you
think
don't like
so.
pimento cheese?
I don't think so. I know I've talked about her before, and I think people tell her
Mm-hmm.
because she'll say something like, I hear I'm famous, or,
Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, next time I'm
uh,
there, I need to try hers. Because I've tried to make pimento cheese before, but
yeah.
like when you stir it, then the cheese kind of gets beat up and like it becomes mush. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some way that I don't haven't figured out yet that you can stir it all together without it. Maybe if you freeze the cheese or something like that before you stir it. I don't know what it is, but
I think she uses Velveeta cheese as part of it. I don't know if that's the only cheese that she uses, but I think that's part of it. And that might have something to do with it because the texture of Velveeta is so different.
well, I would think that that would even get mushier because when you
Mm,
stir Velveeta, it just kind of mushes. But anyway,
yeah.
I'll figure that out because
Yeah.
the ones that I like the most have different colors of cheeses. Like it'll have white cheese and yellow cheese. And I mean, I could literally leave the pimentos out, but I'm always intrigued by pimento cheese now.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I thought of you. I was
I've
eating
got
my
a
sandwich and
bowl.
thinking of you.
Yeah. Well, I hope you liked it.
I
I've
did.
got a big pot of lasagna soup on the stove right now because my
I
mom and my
love your lasagna
sister-in-law,
soup.
Karen and Lauren, and my mom are coming, and Kason, my great
Mm,
nephew, they're coming right after we finish the podcast. And I
mhm,
also made some bread. I've got bread in the bread maker.
mm.
And I toyed with this being my something good for you. I've mentioned it before, but I have something better, not better, but different for something good for you. But these Sally Lunn rolls, have you ever made those?
I
Do you
don't
even
think
have a
so.
bread maker?
No, I did when we were first married.
I didn't even know they made them then.
Wow. Rude,
Seriously, because
rude.
bread makers were. What year did
They
y'all get
did.
married? 90.
Somebody, 92, somebody gave me one when we were first married.
I guess that's kind of when they started getting popular. But these Sally Lunn,
In my day.
your day is not that far back. But these, I feel like sourdough, that's so popular right now. And I love sourdough, but I always hear people say, I can't get it right, or I can't make it look right, or whatever. It
Mhm,
just seems difficult. And they're yeast rolls, but they come out good every single time.
mhm.
And they're super easy. It's just a bread maker. And you don't make the rolls in the bread maker, you make the dough. But it's
Okay.
just 3 tablespoons of butter, 1 egg, and a cup of milk, and you just put it in a container and microwave it for a minute. And then you pour that in the bottom of the bread maker. Then you put 3 cups of flour on top of that. Then you put a teaspoon of salt, a third cup of sugar, and then a package of yeast.
Mhm.
I think that's all. I don't think I'm missing anything. I'll post the recipe again next week. But then you just set it to dough on the bread maker. And when it's an hour and a half later, usually it's a 90-minute cycle, and you just lay it out on the counter, cut it into rolls, let it rise a little more, and they're always good.
Mm,
So
sounds
anyway, I've
good.
got that in the bread maker right now. So
That's going to be a delicious meal.
it's not exactly garlic French bread, which is what I like to have with lasagna soup,
Yeah. Mhm.
but they will be good anyway.
Can't be bad. Can't be
Hmm.
bad. Yeah.
It's bread. How bad can it be? Well, How bad for you can it be?
I made sourdough again. I'm trying to keep my starter happy, but it's in the fridge. But since there's
See,
just the
it's
two
even
of us,
cranky. It's even cranky when you're trying to feed it.
yeah, it can be. But since there's just the two of us, it kind
Hmm.
of works out for me. We'll eat on it fresh for a couple of days, like a slice with soup or
Yeah.
something, and then I just slice the rest of it up and put it in the freezer. And then all we got to do is pull out a slice for the toaster
Hmm.
at breakfast or something. But
You can make good croutons out of that too, I bet.
yeah, can definitely make good croutons. So,
Hmm. Paige Waddell,
mm,
Paige Waddell gave me some dried out starter, and it's still in my cabinet. And apparently, all I have to do is add water to it.
yeah,
That's the kind of starter that I need. It's the kind that's very low maintenance.
yeah.
This chair that I'm sitting in,
Mhm.
I brought it back from Denver, and you can raise it, but it slowly sinks. So probably by the end of the podcast, I'm going to be looking at the
It'll be
screen like
shorter.
this. So if you see me, if you see the top of my face, that's why.
That'll be our time measure. You know,
Yeah.
like you're getting
Yeah.
shorter and shorter. It's time to end this
It's
thing.
time to quit. It's like
once
a,
once you disappear, we're done.
okay, maybe I better ramp it back up
I will
again.
tell you real quick before we get into it, because I know we need to get into it. But Peaches got out again.
Peaches.
Yes.
Naughty,
So
naughty.
I'm telling you, Neil and I both have a little bit of PTSD now when somebody rings the doorbell first thing in the morning. Because, in fact, as I mentioned, he's out of town, and early this morning I heard sirens going by, which we don't hear very often out here.
Hmm.
And my first thought was, Peaches got out and somebody hit her on the road. You know, I'm just so anyway, we now have a cattle gate at the end of our driveway.
Yeah.
We now literally have to open one of those things every time we drive in and out or check the mail, or
You have
we
a
never
remote
thought we
on it, or
would.
you have to get out and
No,
do
we
it.
don't have anything. I mean, it is barely on there right now. We've got to put because it kind of had to slap it up there as
Hmm.
like real quick measure, but it's chained on. When you move it, like the whole thing is kind of
Yeah.
floppy. So it's not even really stabilized on there.
Yeah.
It's just
Not
enough to
short
make
up.
sure if Peaches gets out, she at least can't go out the front down the road. We're still going to have to fence along the sides so that she can't get out the back through the woods. But
Mm.
anyway, Jeremy came to the rescue and he had the gate, and then he put on we have an electric fence line. He changed out the power. I don't know what you call it, but we had one that was like a 5 mile electric fence power thing. He put on a 60 mile one. So it is super hot,
Oh,
super hot. And then he took Peach's head and just went down, made her touch the fence line with her face
poor
so that she
Peaches.
would know.
She earned it though.
I know. When Neil told me he did that, I was like, oh. And then we thought, better him than us. Let her be mad
Yeah.
at him and not
Because
us.
Neil
But
tried it before.
yeah,
Have you ever thought
yeah,
about putting an air tag on her collar?
that is a genius idea. Oh, wow. I am writing that down. Anyway,
Okay.
the good news is we met yet another neighbor.
In a way, you didn't really want to meet them, huh?
Bad news is it was because Peaches screamed
Mm.
chicken. Oh, yeah, we're
Well,
like, what are we doing?
evangelism by cow. My name is Kathy Pollard. I'd like to invite you to the Lehman Avenue Church of Christ. By the way, can I pick
Remember?
up my cow peaches?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
All right.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to share before we get into it?
I don't think so. I'm
Sounds
good.
like we're about to fight. Before we get into it,
Let's get into it.
let's get into it. So, along that note, perfect segue, we are going to talk about how to get along with anyone. And I wanted to talk about this because I ran across this little article by the same title, and it was by a guy named Mel Savange or Savange,
Is he
S
French?
A
Sauvage.
Savange, Savange, Mel Savage. But anyway, he is an executive coach. He does leadership coaching for large businesses and corporations. And the premise is how to get along with everybody and be successful in your business by getting along with everybody that you work with
Mm.
as you lead them. But he only had three things that he says he goes around and tells everybody when he meets with these companies. And I was so intrigued by it because no surprise that those three things that he mentioned are biblical principles. Even
Mm,
though this was not biblical in any way, he did not approach it in any kind of Christian, tactic or anything. But
hmm.
his principles for success in getting along with anybody are biblically based. And go figure.
Yeah.
So I thought we should talk about that. We should have a discussion about how to get along with anybody, look at his three suggestions, and then talk about how the Bible does, in fact, say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so that it'll help us. Do you have anybody in your life that you don't necessarily get along with? You don't have to name names.
Uh, should plead the fifth. No, I was talking to John about this morning. He said, I think you can get along with anybody for a short period of time. You should be able to. Well, really, you should be able to get along with anybody, period, if you're a
Mm-hmm.
Christian, because, if you're using those Christian principles, I'm sure you're going to bring up. But,
Mm-hmm.
there's just some people, because our personalities are different, maybe just we rub them the wrong way, they rub us the wrong way, they just think differently than we do. So yeah, this is going to be helpful for me. So I'm looking forward to you teaching me. I'm just going to sit here and say, uh-huh, uh-huh.
Well, and some of them, you're right. We kind of have that benefit of not really spending a lot of time with them. We don't have to spend a lot of time with them,
Hmm.
and so it's easy to practice the golden rule or be nice or whatever because it's going to be a little short window. But what about if it's a coworker, an in-law, or other family member or a church family member?
Yeah.
That is your spiritual family that you worship
Hmm.
with and serve with and evangelize with, and we're all going to have them. I asked you that kind of jokingly because, of course, we all have people in our life that we think are hard to get along with. And
Hmm.
so, what does the Bible have to say about that? Well, so I thought I would just share, and you jump in anytime. I know we don't really chat ahead of time about how we're going to do this.
Right.
So, you've got your own thoughts and approaches and, whatever. But so, here's the first thing that he came up with. Number one, I felt like he started out with the hardest one right
I'm
out
writing
of the
these
gate.
down.
Number one, don't require them to change.
What if they're
Don't
wrong?
require exactly. And honestly, I can't help but think about this when it comes to marriage too. There are times when
Hmm.
we're just not getting along. Neil and I call it clacking
Hmm.
because we're not clicking, and so we're clacking. And sometimes we don't know why. Sometimes we do. And I know for a fact this number one is my biggest problem because I'm thinking you should think about this the way I do. You should respond
Yeah.
the same way I do and have have the same approach I do. Don't require them to change. Here's what he said, and it's really, really good advice. Wishing someone was different only brings you disappointment.
That's that premeditated, the expectations are premeditated resentments. I mean, just saying
Yes.
it a different way.
Yes. Wishing someone was different only brings you disappointment. They are totally fine.
Yeah.
Instead, accept them as they are. Leaders know to work with what they have versus what they wish they had.
Mm-hmm.
So that's his thoughts, and very, very good. But I was looking at Romans 13, which is a great text for this whole topic
Mm-hmm.
in general. But I saw something I never really thought about before. It was kind of an interesting thought in how the whole chapter starts out. It talks about our governing authorities and submitting to our governing authorities, and it mentions all these different ways, and then it keeps mentioning why. And keep in mind, when Paul was writing this, they did not have friendly governing authorities
Right.
at all, very antagonistic. And so verses 1 through 7 of Romans 13 talk about this, the whole submitting to them. But verse 3, he says, do you want to be free from fear of those in authority? Then do right. Verse 4 says, they're only a problem if you're a wrongdoer. Verses 6 and 7 is where he says, if you owe taxes, pay your taxes.
Hmm.
But what I thought was interesting is throughout this little admonition, if you will, three times he reminds them that God is the one that established those authorities. And then three times he said, talking about the one in authority, the governing bodies, he said, the one in authority is God's servant.
Mm-hmm.
3 times. And, in light of what he goes on to say after that, I kept thinking about this scenario that we're talking about, whoever it is that we're having a hard time getting along with, a coworker or whoever it is God's servant somehow.
Mm-hmm.
They're in our relationship, they're in our sphere of influence somehow. And, God's the one that's in control. But in that context of everything that he just talked about, that's when we come across verse 8, where it says, let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. So it carries so much more weight in the context that he shares that in, that the only debt that we're to have to anybody is to love them. We owe it to them to love them. In context, he's not talking about lovable people,
Mm-hmm.
but God's the one that put them in the position. They're God's servant. And our responsibility in that case is to give them what we owe them, including taxes, and to love one another. So just a little interesting background in this whole idea of don't require them to change. That wasn't even mentioned in context of how to submit, respect, be responsible to the authorities. None of that was even mentioned. It was God's the one that put them there. You behave how you're supposed to behave. And so it seems like the answer is if you can't require them to change, act like you love them. And, and I don't mean act as in play acting, like pretend like you love them, but act out as if you love them. Show actions as if you love them. 1 John 3:18 says, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. So I know I've said a lot there. Want to jump in with anything?
Um, well, that is interesting. I had never really thought about owe nothing except to love one another. And the way you said it, we owe it to one another to love one another.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people who are hard to get along with usually are that way because there's something that's happened in their life to make them that way. And so I think when you shift your thinking about that and realize that we owe it to them to love them because that's the assignment, if you will, that God gives us. Maybe we find out why they're that way instead of being resentful of the way that they are, find out, you can't just walk up to somebody and say, hey, why are you so grouchy? It doesn't go over very well if you try. But if you treat them in a kind way and get to know them a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
dig a little bit deeper, maybe. And I've always found that to be interesting. That Jordan had a classmate's mother that I got to be friends with, and she said whenever her son had a problem with someone, they would invite him over and play,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would become friends, and then there was no problem anymore. And maybe that's what we need to do as adults is people who are difficult and or at least that we perceive as difficult, spend some time with them and then you find
Mm-hmm.
out that you really do have some things in common or that you can appreciate about them or makes it easier to love them. So I like that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we probably should have started out with what makes somebody hard to get along with, and but I think with both of us, our mind automatically went to they have a difficult personality,
Yeah.
you know, arrogance or prickliness or whatever it might be. They just might be hard to get along with. But sometimes we have a hard time getting along with people, and the problem's on our end,
Mm-hmm.
and think about that person that you were the one everybody loved until they came on the scene, and now everybody loves them, and they're more popular, and they're more fun, and so you're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
this resentment or jealousy or envy or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden, you just don't get along with them very well. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is on ours, or it could be you don't get along with somebody because you've got a history with them.
Yeah.
There's something in your past where one of you wronged the other, and it's not that they're hard to get along with now. You've just still got that carryover
Mm-hmm.
resentment or whatever it is toward them. So there can be all different kinds of reasons why. It's not necessarily always just the other person's fault.
Right.
But regardless, 1 Peter 4:8 says, above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that verse catches me by surprise every single time I read it. I don't know why, because I've
Mm-hmm.
read it before. I know what it says, But it's almost like I have such a hard time imagining that to be true.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't it one of those things where it's like God says, put me to the test, try it and see.
Yeah.
Try it and see. You demonstrate love, you show love to this person, you act like you love this person, and see if it doesn't change how you view that person,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Make you love
And
them in for real.
yeah, exactly.
And I always found it interesting too that see if I can say this carefully. When you get to know somebody and you spend time with them and you find that you love them because you've become friends or because there's things you appreciate, you have things in common, you've spent time together, you tend to be more forgiving of issues. Um, I don't know how to exactly say it, but you tend to be you let things slide that you wouldn't ordinarily let slide. And I'm not saying that God's going to let sin slide, but I think God wants us to see others in the way that he sees us in how he forgives because he longs to forgive. He wants to forgive everyone. He wants us to see other people. I'm going to botch this. But when you love someone, you forgive them because you want to. When you don't love someone, you hold things against them and you have a hard heart against them and you hold grudges and that's not how God loves each and every individual person. So I think when we love one another and we see one another in the light that God does, it's easier to understand how God can forgive those who want to be forgiven. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm wanting to say something, but it's going to come up in a later point here. But,
Okay.
and here's a little personal insight, everybody, into looking up in the backstory. But when we were first talking about this, do you remember what you said to me? One of
Which
your
part?
concerns, yeah, the part that relates to our topic. One of the concerns that you had was you didn't want anything to ever hurt our friendship.
Friendship. Yeah.
And I was like, what? How could this possibly hurt our friendship? But I think what you were saying is we'll be spending more time together. We'll be talking more often. We'll be getting to know each other even better than we had before. And, think about close relationships, sibling relationships, marriage relationships, church family relationships, and of course, and all of those, the common ingredient is more time together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing and a bad thing,
Yeah.
because um, spending time together grows relationships, but it also exposes things about each other and you learn more about each other, just like you were saying. But when you have that loving relationship, as you were saying, and you see people the way God does, you just understand that that's part of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, say you meet somebody and your initial assessment of them was they're just gruff
Yeah.
and overbearing, larger than life, loud, obnoxious. But after spending time with them, maybe you run across or hear about something where they were the most tender-hearted response in the whole group. They
And
were
how
the
many
person,
times has that happened?
yes, they are the
Repeatedly.
ones who were
Mm-hmm.
most touched by somebody
Yeah.
else's plight or scenario and bent
Mm-hmm.
over backwards to do it. That's what happens when you spend time with people and you love anyway, is you start seeing everything.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to talk about that a little bit more later.
Okay. Right. Moving
Um,
on.
so why do we feel like we have to figure other people out? you know, this under this thought of don't try and change them. Why do we feel like we have to understand them? We should try to be understanding, but really, is it my job to try and get in their brain and figure out why they tick the way they do, or think the way they do, or act the way they do? No, that is not my job.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, I can't do that. I don't read
Yeah.
hearts. I don't have their background. I can try and be understanding, but I shouldn't feel like I always have to figure people out. Why are they the way they are? But I can, in that scenario, pray for them. I can love them as I'm supposed to, and then move on. Proverbs 10:12 says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. So it kind of ties back
Mm-hmm.
to that First Peter 4:8. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you were saying. You're just when you love somebody like you're supposed to, you're more forgiving of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to have things because we're all human. And then Colossians 3:14 says, love binds everything together in perfect harmony, which I thought was the perfect verse for this topic of getting along with people, in the work or family environment or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Love is what is going to bind everything together in perfect harmony.
And love, that kind of love is a command. The
Mm-hmm.
agape love is a command. It's not a feeling, it's a choice. So when you choose to love someone, I know that doesn't, it kind of goes against the grain. It's hard to understand, but you make a decision. And you see this over and over. I know you and I have in different counseling situations, premarital, postmarital, whatever. When you decide, I I know I'm going to overlook these offenses and love anyway, then that's when God really takes off in our life. Is when we make that
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. Mm. Um, so anything else on that one before we go to the second thing then? Okay, the second thing he says, the first one was don't try and change them, don't expect them to change. The second one is you go first. That's what it's called. You go first. And I thought
Okay.
about you in this one because you've talked about this before on this podcast. Here's what he said. You like it when people are nice and patient and appreciative, so you go first. You can't control them, but you can decide to be nice and patient and appreciative yourself.
Mhm.
Now, again, you can see how he's talking about specifically on the job, leading a workplace type environment, but that is so biblical. And I thought about you because I wrote it down here, but where is that verse about
It's Romans 12,
leading?
isn't it?
Yeah, leading the way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's
Romans 12
12:10.
10,
Mm-hmm.
outdo one another in showing honor. And you've
Mm-hmm.
talked about on here before that it means to lead the way. You
Go
go
first and lead the
first
way.
in
Mm-hmm.
showing honor. So his second thing that he teaches is very, very biblical. And I thought of 1 Corinthians 13:4 because what's the very first description of love? Love is patient and kind. And that's what he talks about. You like it when people are nice and patient. So you go first. Galatians 5:22 and 23, that whole passage talking about walking in the spirit instead of living according to the flesh. What is the fruit of that? What does walking in the spirit look like? It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness,
Mm-hmm.
faithfulness, gentleness, self control, all these things that are going to make it easier for us to get along with everybody. But we can go first in demonstrating those. And isn't that the rub, though? That's the hard part. That's the challenge. We keep using that word intention. Point number one, we're talking about you just have to act like you love people. And you wake up before you go to work, you're prayerful about it. I'm intentionally going to treat this person like I'm supposed to. I'm intentionally going to demonstrate love. And then what happens?
They do something
It's
stinky.
it's the most crotchety day ever.
Uh-huh.
And you're like, here I
Mm-hmm.
am. I was determined not to, blah, blah, blah. And then this happens because instead of getting out ahead of it by going first in all these areas, a lot of times it seems like we just respond.
Right.
We're spending too much time responding, reacting, you
Mm-hmm.
know, responding to the vibes that we perceive are being given off or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
that's when it's hard.
I've noticed that sometimes when things like that happen, somebody will say, just take the high road,
Mm-hmm.
be the better person. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's very true. Take the high road and be the better person. But usually, in the
Yeah.
context in
Yeah.
which that's said, they're like, well, I'm going to do, you almost like you're patting yourself on the back
Mm-hmm.
and you're slamming them while you're elevating yourself. And I've heard and I've thought that so many times when I've heard somebody say,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to take the high road. It's like, you're not. You're not taking the high road. You're actually taking the low road if you're just puffing yourself up and
Mm-hmm.
saying, I mean, yes, go first. I think that is exactly what we should do, but not in the sense that you're taking a deep sigh and rolling your eyes at whoever's not doing what when you're trying to change them, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Almost as if
but
you're trying to see, look how great this chasm is
yeah,
between my goodness and their jerkiness.
right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think we have to be careful not to be that person that's I'm gonna be the better person.
Mm-hmm.
Really. do be the better person, but not in order to show that, shine a light on yourself and
Mhm.
a different kind of light on them. So
Well,
anyway.
and the verse is outdo one another in showing honor. You
Mm-hmm.
go first, and it's not outdoing one another. So you can say, see how much better I am. It's in whatever way you need to show that person honor and make them feel like they're the better person. That's
Mm-hmm.
what that's all about. So
Yeah.
we get it completely backwards. I'm so humble.
Mm-hmm. Wear my
I
humble
mean,
badge
Pat, my,
today.
yes, makes me think of that saying, I'd like to be humble, but what if no one notices? You know, um, so the question is, what if they're barely tolerable? I mean, this is a really tough one. This is a really
Mm-hmm.
difficult person. And I'm supposed to be patient, kind of. I'm supposed to lead the way and all these, fruit of the spirit type attributes. But what if they're barely tolerable? Well, Ephesians 4:2, there's a verse for that.
Mm-hmm.
It says, with all humility
Yeah.
and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love.
Yeah.
And the word bearing here literally means to put up with and to regard with tolerance. So he's saying, you tolerate them. And this is how, with humility, gentleness, patience. I mean, like you say, we're not fulfilling the command if we make it very clear to them that we're tolerating them.
Mm-hmm.
We use that phrase, they just barely tolerate each other. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we give off that vibe and we think it's good enough. Well, I'm not retaliating. I'm not responding in the same vexing way they are, but I'm barely tolerating them. Well, that's not what this is. This is
Mm-hmm.
they probably have something that's hard because you have to put up with it, as the word bearing implies,
Mm-hmm.
but you do it with gentleness, humility, and patience. Um, I ran across a saying that says, don't adapt to the energy in the room, influence the energy in the
Mm-hmm.
room. And I think that's that whole getting in front of,
Yeah.
getting ahead of, it's like pain medicine. When
Mm-hmm. Stay
somebody
on
has
top of
had
it.
surgery and they say, don't wait until you're hurting,
Yeah.
take it every 3 or 4 hours so that you stay ahead of the pain. That's exactly what this is. You
Mm-hmm.
walk into the room loving, patient, kind, and get ahead of it, lead the
Yeah.
way. Um, Influence the energy in the room. And then 1 Timothy 4:12 says that we're to set an example in our speech, in our conduct, in love. So the rest of what love looks like in 1 Corinthians 13, love does not envy or boast, is not arrogant or rude, does not insist on its own way, is not irritable or resentful, and keeps no record of wrongs. So all of those things tie into what we're talking about.
It just stomps all over my toes when I think, what is it about us, human nature? Maybe some of us are worse than others, but I find myself when I'm offended by something, usually it's John because we're together all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
I want to clap back with something smart. If he
Mm-hmm.
if he says something to me that hurts my feelings, I want to respond, even if he didn't mean it to be that way. I want to respond with sarcasm, or
Mm-hmm.
I want to have this really good retort,
Mm-hmm.
and it's usually not nice. And so, what good does that do? And believe me, I'm talking to myself here.
Mm-hmm.
What good does it do? Because it doesn't, if I respond that way, it only makes things worse. And there's just something human nature. We want to have something really smart alecky to say. And we're like, ah, I really got you good with that one. Well, what good does it do? When,
Mm-hmm.
the passage that says, what is it? When you respond with a soft answer, it turns away wrath. I'm sure that's the King James. I don't know what the others are, but if it just really does take the wind out of our sails in a good way when we don't respond with a retort or a smart alecky comment or whatever. If we, someone that's barely tolerable, whatever, for whatever reason, and they clap back at you for something, and we just get bowed up. But what if we were to just smile, or just say, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry. Or, I know you and I've had these conversations before, and it's so hard to do
It
because they
is.
wronged us, and they've we want to show them that they're being hard to get along with.
Mhm.
Why should we be around you? Why should we do this to you? And then I think, well, how many times am I that way to the Lord, to my husband? And then, that question, why should I? It just doesn't have the same effect if I'm the one that's on the receiving end of it. And I know that I deserve that. So we've
Well, I
got to be
really hated
careful.
that you took it in this direction. But little personal confession telling on myself here. Because I always think it's that same thing, speaking of husbands, this morning I'm going to be so sweet all day long. I'm going to be the best wife ever. And then, you know, if Neil's in a hurry or impatient or stressed, whatever it is, I'm like all indignant. "Ah, here I am trying to
Hmm.
be sweet." And and I'm always thinking he's the one that ruins my mood. I was perfectly fine until fill in the blank. Well,
Hmm.
the other day, Carla, we were in the store looking at a shelf. I don't even remember what we were looking at. Neil came up and asked me a question. I don't even remember what his question was, but apparently I snapped when I responded. I probably thought it was a dumb question and I answered in kind. I don't know. But anyway, he just kind of stopped and looked at me and he said, "Now, all I did was walk up and ask you, whatever the question was."
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, it was just the look on his face or something. It really, that time, cut to the heart. I mean, I'm so good at being defensive and not apologizing. Typically,
Hmm.
that is something I always struggle with.
Yeah,
Not
me
proud
too.
of it. I'm not saying it to be boastful of my weakness, but there's just something about the look on his face. And I just said, "You're right. Let's try that again." So I turned around, like I was looking at the shelf, and he came up
Hmm.
and asked me, and I just answered it. And then I said, "I'm sorry for the way I answered the first time." I think we both about died from shock. I mean,
Yeah.
and he even looked at me and he said, "That is very attractive." Only he didn't use that word.
You keep that to yourself.
And it just, it was sweet and mortifying at the same time
Hmm.
because I thought, how sad is it that that was so surprising to him for me to
Hmm.
acknowledge that I was wrong, that
Hmm.
I snapped at him and I didn't need to, that I was wrong, and to apologize for it is so uncommon
Hmm.
that it was a thing,
Yeah.
and
So we can even grow in our 50s.
yeah, well, I grew that one day. I don't know. No, but lead the way. Lead the
Hmm.
way. Leviticus 19:18 says that instead of bearing a grudge against someone, and that's the word that it uses, instead of bearing a grudge, treat them the way you want to be treated and love them as you would love yourself, which of course, Luke 6:35, love your enemies and do good and blend, expecting nothing in return. And I liked that one because that's where I get hung up when I say, okay, I'm gonna handle this better. I'm gonna try and be patient and gentle. And then I feel like they're not responding how they're supposed to. Hey, I'm doing my part.
Yeah.
How come you're not
Not fair.
responding in kind?
Hmm.
Forget about it. Well, this whole lend expecting nothing in return, it's
Hmm.
about motivation.
Yeah.
And we don't act a certain way because we're trying to force them to change or even to respond in kind.
Hmm.
Um, Lend expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great, and you'll be sons of the Most High, for He is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Ouch.
Hmm.
So, no matter how you look at it, all these verses, like there's no out, there's no excuse, unless they're a particularly difficult person and you've been
Yeah.
dealing with them for 7 years.
Yeah.
There's none of
Hmm.
that is anywhere.
Hmm.
It's just all about remember who you are and who you're representing and focus on your responsibility.
Makes me think of seen many times that Jesus went in the night before he was crucified. He went in to wash the feet of all the disciples, and he knew that Judas, and of course, it's a pithy statement, and I can't remember how it said, but he knew that Judas was about to betray him. But he went in
Mm-hmm.
prepared to wash Judas's feet, even though he knew. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we need to be
And
more
he
like him.
says, "I've given you an example."
Hmm.
Ugh. Okay, so The first one was don't expect them to change. The second one was you go first.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is clean up your thinking about the person.
Hmm.
So here we get into our mindset about them to begin with. Clean up your thinking about the person. This is what he said. What you think about a person is a filter for how easy it's going to be to get along with them. And we know that's true just in the examples that we've been talking about in marriage, even. You know, what you think about that person is a filter for how easy it's going to be to get along with them. What you think about them is a choice that you're making every single day. So it puts the responsibility squarely on our shoulders. Good leaders choose to focus on what's working with a person versus what's not working.
Hmm.
Okay, so very good, excellent advice. And we know the Bible tells us exactly how we're to think of others, how we're to view others. Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. Two traits, by the way, that really interfere with us getting along with
Mm-hmm.
others. um, but in humility, count others more significant than yourselves, and let each of you look not only to his own interest, but to the interests of others.
Mm-hmm.
And on these lines, I thought how easy it is for us to find the dirt on other people. You know, it takes no talent to do that. Anybody can do that. If we're in the habit of doing that, we probably catalog people and do it all the time. You know, they're okay, but
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. This is what I've noticed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really easy to do that. The hard thing is to see the soul and to see them the way God wants us to see them, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And why is it that it's so much easier to see the dirt on others than it is on ourselves, by the way? Proverbs 11:27. I love this verse. Whoever diligently seeks good seeks favor, but evil comes to him who searches for it. Basically, it's saying you find what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking for the good in others, you will find it. You will find it. And if you're not, if you're looking for everybody's flaws and faults and whatever, you will find that. So,
Right.
a quote that I shared, it showed up in my memories today on Facebook. I shared this years ago. Thankfulness will change your mood faster than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so appropriate to what we're talking about because if I'm just thankful for that person and I pray and thank God for traits about that person, it'll change my mood or my thoughts toward that person. So clean up your thinking about the person. Do you have anything else
I've
on
heard
that
it
before I go
said
on?
reframe your thinking. And when you look, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to write that out and to get the
Mm-hmm.
emphasis on the right words, but reframing your thinking means that you're going to back up in the way that you typically try to go, which is finding the negative
Mm-hmm.
and looking for ways to put them down. You back yourself up, say, not going to do that. For every one thing that I was going to say negative, I'm going to find two good things. And I think once you do that for a while, repeatedly, then you find it to become more of a habit. And
Mm-hmm.
it really, you said, God is in the heart changing business. I can't remember if that was before we were recording or not. You said, why does that seem cliche? But it's so true that God can change your heart, but you got to put the work in. And when you
Yeah.
decide, okay, I'm going to quit seeing the negative. I'm going to quit sharing the negative because why do we do that? And
Mm-hmm.
that just drives me crazy. I know I do it. I've tried not to do it. I've worked on that. Why do we feel like we have to share what's negative about someone else to our
Mm-hmm.
friends? Because it hurts. It hurts people. It hurts if you're the one that someone's saying, yeah, this is what happened, especially in the past. If it's something, if what we remember about something is from when they were 17 years old and now they're 27 or
Yikes.
37,
Yeah.
well, I'm a different person than
Yeah.
I was 2 years ago. So, I think I'm rambling a little bit, but let's move
Well,
along from that.
it's so practical though, and it's another challenge that I've seen, and like especially if you can do it for a specific person that you're just having a hard time getting along with,
Mm,
is every time you see a person, and the challenge was for everybody. for everybody that you meet throughout the day, mentally catalog two or three things that you love and appreciate about that person.
Hmm.
You can voice it out loud if you want to, but mentally do that.
Yeah.
And I love that because it'll just be training your mind, create a new path, create new
Hmm.
synapses in your brain
Hmm. Yeah.
of automatically seeing the best in others instead of
Hmm.
the opposite of that, which is
And
also a
it
bad
changes.
habit. Yeah.
It
And it
does
does,
happen.
it does change.
Hmm.
Um, you mentioned how you talk about them, and I noted that too. In addition to cleaning up how you think about somebody, clean up how you talk about them. So if
Hmm.
you're in the habit of saying nice things about that person to other people, that will really help you change your thinking about them. Proverbs 17:9, whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. And then I thought, really, a good summary verse for the whole topic on how to get along with others was Proverbs 3, verses 3 and 4. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, so you'll find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. So, our favor and good success with others and with God depends on steadfast love and faithfulness.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I like how it says, I mean, like, like you latch onto it, bind it around your neck, write it on your heart, do whatever it takes to have steadfast love and faithfulness.
Hmm. Yeah. Good points.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're moving on from this or if that's it, but I had just, like you've said, we don't compare notes before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to think, be honest with myself, I guess. Do I have a hard time getting along with people? And I really don't think that I do. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that we have to be best friends with everybody. We all have different personalities. We just have certain people we're drawn to that we enjoy being around. We have
Mm-hmm.
things in common. We have distinct histories, and those histories, coincide sometimes, and so we have things
Mm-hmm.
to talk about. So I don't think that God necessarily intends that we all be bosom buddies all the time, but He does intend that we all love one another and that we treat one another with respect and give honor to them, and the passage in Philippians 2 that you just brought up, treat everyone as more significant than we are. And that was just what the only thing that I wrote down was to get along with just about anybody is to make the other person feel significant. Because when I
Mm-hmm.
really was thinking about what is it that raises my hackles about people sometimes when I'm treated this way, it's when I'm either dismissed or treated with disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that disrespect, I think, can be misinterpreted, and maybe the dismissal too. But you know how sometimes you feel like someone's just, okay, next, they're not interested in you. You just feel like they don't care anything about you. They're not interested in what you have to say. And that makes me defensive, to be
Yeah.
dismissed, to be
Mm-hmm.
treated with a feeling of disrespect. And so I think how I respond to that, or maybe not how I respond to that, but what is it that I'm going to do to not allow other people to feel that I'm treating them that way, is to make them feel significant. And how do we do that? How do we make someone feel significant? And I think that's by complimenting them, finding something positive to say, asking questions, acting interested, even when maybe we're in a hurry or not interested. But
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of one of those fake it till you make it kind of things, even though I don't even really like that saying. But I think
Yeah.
we can all come up with some questions about someone, or tell me where did you come from? And at first it kind of feels disingenuous, because you may not really be super interested. But I think the more we do it and we make ourselves plug in, some of it's personality differences. When you're an
Mm-hmm.
introvert, you have a little harder time doing that kind of thing. But once you start doing it, it becomes more comfortable. You just have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone. So making other people feel significant, I think, is one way that we can get along with just about anybody.
Yeah. And I think that we need to be careful about letting ourselves off the hook, though. And I agree that we don't have to be bosom buddies with everybody and they're the
Mm-hmm.
person that you're always going to want to hang out with and go have lunch with or whatever. But, honestly, is there, this particularly is talking about getting along with somebody that you obviously are in close relationships with via work or family or whatever. But in our own church family, yeah, there are people that I'll be closer to than others, but I need to
Mm-hmm.
honestly look at my heart, maybe even go through the directory. Is there somebody in here that I've got issues with? And if so, I have a responsibility to that person. And I'm not talking about confronting them or, making things awkward or creating a situation because they might not have any
Mm-hmm.
awareness whatsoever that they drive me crazy,
Yeah.
you know. But when we read verses like, you love them, you do good to them, you bless them, and those talk about, literally doing physical good things for them. Blessing them is literally speaking highly of them to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I have a responsibility, and I think about God's family as, how I would feel in my own family. We have three sons, three daughters in law, three grandchildren. If there was a relationship amongst them that was strained,
Mm-hmm.
it would hurt my heart
Hurts. Yeah.
because I don't want that in my family. I want
Yeah.
everybody in my family to love each other and lift each other up and be good to each other and, comfort. That's what I want in my family. And anything less than that is going to hurt my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the church is God's family,
Yeah.
and He wants His children to love each other, do good for each other. And I think the responsibility falls on us if there is somebody like that rubs me the wrong way, I just don't really care for. It is my responsibility to look for ways to do better at showing love and
Mm-hmm.
looking for opportunities to bless, do good, pray for. They don't have to know anything about it. I don't think I have to go up to them and say, I've had a problem with you in my heart. I think that might
And
hurt their,
I worked on it.
well, and I think that might hurt their feelings too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that. But if there's somebody that I would rather avoid and walk the other way, and, that's easy to
Mm-hmm.
avoid and walk the other way and just be civil. But
Yeah.
I don't think that's good enough. I think that
Right.
Jesus is calling for more.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And look at what he did.
Yeah. Like
The
what you
ultimate
said with the
example.
example. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I know we need to wrap things up. Anything else you want to share?
Only that I heard my bread maker beep about 10 minutes ago. So
Oh,
probably the
no.
bread is like, "Whoa." It's okay. This is more important than that.
Please share a
It'll
picture
still
if
be
it
good.
has overflown like a dough monster, because
Uh-huh.
those are the best pictures.
Yeah,
Okay. Do you have something good for us?
I do.
What you got?
These are just another little Walgreens thing. They're pictures, but they have magnets on the back. So I
Oh,
keep these on my
cute.
fridge. But I think I've mentioned these before, but what I like about this and the idea that I have that's something good for you is that I have taken one of these every Christmas for the past 8 years, I guess. I didn't bring them all in here. But so this was 2000. If you're watching, you can see 2000. That was the
Wow.
year that John had the heart event. And we only had Jackson and Emmy then, but we're all touching John's chest because Aaron
Oh,
made shirts that said, I can't remember exactly. It said something like, I love someone that's a sudden cardiac survivor. But then the next year we had Turner and Clara came. So I have one from 2021. Here's 2022, 2023. But my idea is every Christmas, take a picture, a selfie, because we like to do selfies. They're just fun of your
y'all are good
family
at
as
it.
it grows. So then I have these all in my refrigerator going back to about 2016, I think. And, just a progression. And you can just see how your family's grown and see how everyone changes. And I just love these. I love looking at, like I'm looking at Livy right now, her first Christmas and how she's changed. And I don't know. I love pictures, as probably you can tell, but these are just from Walgreens. They're usually like $2.99, and I give everyone. So I've given, Jordan's family gets one, Jake's family gets one, Mike's family. Usually I
It's a
print one
great
out for my
idea.
mom, but they're
Hmm.
just magnets. They're 4x6
That's cute.
magnets. Yeah.
I like that. I thought about you the other night because we had the Northern Lights
Hmm.
here and I was out there taking pictures and it was late and Neil and I were in the front yard and I said, "Hey, let's get a selfie with the northern lights in the background."
How'd it
He
go?
came inside and looked at it. It was horrible. It was horrible. Our faces looked kind of abnormally large in the screen with
Hmm.
the lights in the background, and we just
Yeah, you
laughed.
have
And
to
even
get
Neil,
Neil to do it and hold it way away,
yes,
and you have to be,
yeah, I know all the
looking up.
tips. It just never works for us. And I've even read up on that, and it just doesn't. We just have, some people gets it and some people don't,
Well,
and we
you
don't.
got the green thumb, and I don't have
Well,
that. So,
even Neil, who typically doesn't care, when we came
hmm,
in and looked at it in the light, he went, no. And I said, oh,
yeah.
Carla always gets a good selfie. She could have done this. She could have pulled this off.
Well, except you're probably trying to look at the get the sky behind you, so you would have had to go down, and then you have the double
Uh,
chin and all that stuff.
oh,
So,
yes, yes.
and looking up
Okay.
the nose.
So
Yeah.
my something good for you is a couple of verses to pray. And so if you're listening and you want to jot these down, you can, but I'll also share these verses in the group in the following week. But concerning the topic that we talked about today, a prayer for you, something you can pray for yourself, is Second Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 5. This is my prayer for all of us. May the Lord direct your hearts to the love of God and to the steadfastness of Christ. And First Thessalonians 3:12. May the Lord make you increase and abound in love for one another and for all, as we do for you.
Perfect for this week's topic.
Yes. And so I enjoyed this conversation, most of this conversation.
Most of it. Me too. Always good.
Yes. And it was good chatting with you. I look forward to talking to you next week. And until
Yep.
next time,
Keep looking up.
love you, friend.
Love you too. Talk to you later.